and certainly can be felt in some of those comments. And, you know, just more broadly, as we were talking about before the break, there's, you know, lots of grassroots people are saying this has nothing to do with me. We've got perfect guests joining us to discuss. Doreen Manuel, she's a filmmaker and a teacher. Her dad, George Manuel, you know from the National Indian Brotherhood, that laid the foundation here for the AFN. And joining us too, Sheila North. She was a national chief candidate back in 2018, who campaigned on getting women involved, but also getting back the AFN back to the basics, working for the grassroots. Sheila has announced that she's running for the Grand Chief with the AMC here in Manitoba, the Manitoba Chiefs Association. Thank you, ladies, both for joining us as we chat today to the fat, as we keep saying, on the AFN, where it's been, where it is, and where it needs to go. Doreen, I'll start with you. If your dad was alive today, what would his thoughts be on what the AFN has or hasn't accomplished or become?
Well, the AFN has become, in its own words, an advocacy organization. What George Manuel worked with back in when he became national chief, August 20th in 1970, he was working with a lobbying organization. That's what they were building. And his first mandate was to set up a steering committee to deal with ministerial issues specific to negotiate with the government on Indian rights and treaty rights, which today you would know as Aboriginal title and rights. And, you know, they were true to that fight and that battle. One of the quotes that's in my latest film, Unceded Chiefs, he says, expand the powers that you have, so as we can control our fishing rights, so as we can control our hunting rights, so as we can control education, so as we can control our whole destiny through our political initiatives. Now listen to that. Expand the powers that you have. You have today, you, I, everybody listening, we have powers. We have the power to shut Canada down and force them back to the negotiation table. What we need is an organization who is willing to step up to the plate and be that original lobbying organization and be clear about the things that we need as a people. Because when you continue to look on the AFN website and you go to the section called policy sections, you have a long list of what I call, there's social issues that are happening in our community and they're vitally important. But AFN does not have to be lobbying for them. We have organizations to lobby for health and all of the other. And in the last 39 years, the AFN hasn't made much progress with those advocacy issues. They need to find a different system to let the organizations that already exist deal with those things, and they need to get back to what's important, Aboriginal title and rights.
I love that point, getting back to Aboriginal title and rights. But I guess, you know, if your goal is to be who can get the most money from Canada, you know, maybe that's the problem.
I think, Doreen, pleased to meet you. I think your dad had it right. Expand the powers that you have. The AFN does not do that anymore. Back in those days when the '69 white paper was out there and everybody came together, it was the people from British Columbia that, in my view, were the most scary. They sang louder. They danced harder. They brought all of that cultural aspect of the powers that they have into those meeting rooms in Ottawa, whether it was by train or plane or automobile. They got there,
yeah.
and that radicalism is not there anymore. You know, yeah. There's a saying that the revolution will not be funded. There was a revolution happening back there, and I think what came along in the years subsequent to George's leadership was that the money increased the way Paul described. When you start to fall in line with government policy, the more you did that, the more money you got, and that unfortunately removed the mandate of the powers that you have to expand on.
Yeah. It
just totally overwhelmed it, and I would like to see that come back.
Sheila, you know, you campaigned back in 2018. You know, much of what we're talking about here. You know, is it unfixable, I guess? Like, once you're in power, is it impossible to do the things that Doreen and Bruce just laid out?
Well, in the current system, I would say it would be very, very difficult. And just to clarify, you know, when I ran in 2018, I didn't run because I was a woman. I ran because I was asked, and I felt like I could make good contributions based on the things that I've learned growing up in the North, but also as a journalist, and also my relationships with leadership. So those are the things that I ran on, and those are the things that I believe that any organization, building bridges, having clear communication, and being open to new partnerships is imperative. And in the current way that the AFN is set up, historically, of course, it was initially like INAC, set up by the federal government. So that's why we have problems. It's controlled still at the end of the day by the federal government, no matter how much money is delivered or sent to AFN for distribution or any other organization. And I'm not trying to be critical to any of those organizations, but the fact is that the federal government is way too involved in our day-to-day lives still to this day, and that's a big hindrance for us. We have the ability to run our own affairs. We have sovereign nations. We have lots of great people in our midst who can run our own affairs, and we should be able to do that now. And I feel like this pandemic has shown us that anything is possible. We can reset relationships, because everything that we've seen up till now, including the pandemic, we've known that the federal government and provincial governments are not doing enough to make sure that our people are healthy and happy, and we can do that ourselves.
There are calls, people say AFN should be completely, shriveled up in a little ball and pitched in the bin because of it's taking all this money and it's not doing anything to help actual people in their lives on the ground. Other people say, this is just the federal government. Canada uses the AFN as a little box to check, which is what Paul Barnsley had said earlier in the show. This is us. Oh, look, we've dealt with the Indians, right? We've checked that box. We can move on. Doreen, should it just be scrapped? Like you were talking about those other organizations, is there a way that we could get better results if more hands were doing the work and AFN was out of the picture?
Yes, I think that what we should be actually fighting for, and I've thought this ever since I was a teenager, we need to be fighting for a different way of getting paid from the government. What they owe us is back taxes on our land. So there should be a more equitable funding formula for paying us for that, not what they're using right now, because everybody knows education funding and all of these fundings are based on a per capita formula that doesn't work for us. It doesn't provide enough education, housing, and all of the other services that we need. We should be collecting a flat percentage rate from all federal, provincial funds raised through taxation, resource extraction, Crown land leases, and every fund that they collect through our territories. They should be paying us a flat rate, a percentage rate from those fees, and that should be retroactive from when those industries started up in our territories. And these funds should be monitored and paid out from our own people, from our own governing board. And they should not be considered government funding, but rather land resource usage payments.
Love that.
Like an Indian taxation payment. And if we were getting that kind of money, when you walk out the door and you look around at the roads, the light poles, the sewer systems, the water systems, everything that's in place in every single place across Canada, we pay for that out of our money. Yeah. So why is it when we go onto the reservation, it's substandard? It shouldn't be. Because the municipalities are getting a formula percentage of all of that money, we should also be getting a greater amount, so that we can build those. Does the AFN have to curl up and die? I don't know. I'd like to see that. Maybe reorganize.
I was going to say that sentiment is very much was felt across the country when I ran for AFN, and I think that's where we're moving to. Even though it feels like it's going at a snail's pace, I believe we're in a moment of time where that's actually happening. And I feel that AFN and AMC and all the PTOs across Canada, they do have a role to play in our country and in our lives. And I think that relationship we've had with them and our organizations is transforming naturally and organically, and it should. It's not the same as it was 30 years ago. Now we have to honor the sovereignty of our First Nations, first of all, and then follow that lead. And I believe that's what it was supposed to be maybe in the past, but I think more so that's needed now.
What would you do to expand that growth you're talking about, Sheila? I mean, to me, it looks like the AFN has become so complacent over the years that they don't do anything. How would you change that? Because they're comfortable. The chiefs are very comfortable with their trips to Ottawa. Well, maybe not so much with the pandemic, but they're very comfortable with the way things are right now. In that sense, they are conservative. What would you do to shake that up? I know you're running regionally, you've run nationally, you've seen a lot of this stuff going on. What would you do to make things different?
Well, Bruce, I think there's a lot of misconceptions of what chiefs are comfortable with, I have to say, because I was Grand Chief of Northern Manitoba, and I can't say that any chief that I've ever worked with was super comfortable and just, you know, living on the laurels of whatever, traveling back and forth to Ottawa. I don't think that's it at all. They have a lot of pressures. And I think that, you know, public perception is part of the problem. We don't actually know what it entails to be a chief or to be in any of these positions, because all we hear from the greater public is that they're spending a lot of money, we're spending a lot of money. And I think that also has to change. And I believe that when public understands, including our own Indigenous people, understand what the work actually entails, then I think that better off we'll be going forward. I know in one community here in Manitoba, they have about 1,000 people, but they only have resources every year for about half of that, maybe even a third. And what are chiefs and communities supposed to do to keep their families safe, happy, not thinking about suicide, all those things? So we have to keep in mind what they're up against, no matter what it seems like that they're living lofty. I
hear what you're saying, Sheila, but at the same time, you heard the comments that were being made from the Facebook, from the social media. You know, there's a lot of people that don't see any results, and they see the organization as flat. And I can understand some of the problems that the Northern Chiefs have with the way things are up there. But the end result is there are more of our people going murdered and missing. There are more of our people committing suicide. Our jails are getting fuller and fuller. And it goes on and on and on. What would you do to change that?
Again, a lot of it is perception that the chiefs don't care or that organizations don't care.
Well, maybe whether they care or not, they have. I'm sorry, Sheila, I don't mean to cut you off. Whether they care or not, the result is the same, and there needs to be some change. And I'm asking you again, what would you do to make that change?
That's why we need to negotiate better and forge new relationships with the federal and provincial governments, like including getting rid of the NRTA and perhaps even the Indian Act. Maybe not get rid of it in its form, but also transform it and reset the relationship. I think that we have a lot of opportunity. We have great negotiators amongst us. We have great lawyers of Indigenous lawyers that can do all these things. And I think it's high time we do it. A lot of it is that relationship that the federal government has set out. They call the shots, unfortunately, in a lot of situations. And at the end of the day, if they don't like what a First Nation is doing, they have the power to yank funding if they want to. And that is always looming on people's heads. And, you know, as long as the federal government has the last say, we're going to keep having these problems.
I want to hear Doreen's thoughts on this.
I want to caution people against being blackmailed like that. Because I have worked for a band. I stood beside my brothers each time when they were chiefs. I was in Ottawa with my dad when he was national chief. And you do have power. You don't have to adhere to all of the social services policy to the exact letter and the education policies. I was an education coordinator. I know how you can stretch those to serve your people better. I was a fundraiser. I brought millions of dollars into my band every single year because I learned how to lobby for funding to help my band increase their revenues. There's ways to work within that system to do a better job that is being done to serve our people better on our communities. And also, I don't want people to feel like there's a gun to their head. You know, back in the 70s, my band rejected funding. Flat out sent it back, said, don't bother with us. We lived great. We had hunting parties out. We had gardens out. We supported ourselves. And we put the government in the position of being afraid of us because if one little Indian group in all of Canada can do that, we're setting an example to help people understand how much power they have. Expand the powers that you have.
Get radical. We've got a caller here and she has a question. Josie?
Yes.
Josie, thanks for calling. What was your question?
Yes, with the $27 billion that has been given to AFN from the federal government, I'm at a loss to understand why there isn't clean water on all of the reserves across Canada.
Everybody's nodding, going, we want to know too, Josie. Who wants to take a stab at that? I mean, it's absurd when you think about the amount of money that goes into doing nothing. Why isn't there like the revolt? Why isn't there the revolution? Why isn't there the radicalism standing up going, I won't say that word because it's 2:00. I almost said it. Doreen, I'll go back to you if you want to take a stab.
Well, first I want to give a comparison. I want people to know that I have my father's journals. This is a tiny little one, but I have his journals that he kept through his whole political career.
People would pay a lot of money to want to sit down with those for an hour or so.
In 1970, when he took over the position, the government had promised $1.7 million to Indigenous organizations. That's not just the National Indian Brotherhood, that's Indigenous organizations across Canada. One of the things he was tasked with was forcing the government to actually give them the money. And he did that. So I'm just like, 1.7 million, billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And nothing's being done. I just wanted to put an exclamation point on that.
Yeah, I like that. Sheila, I would ask you, you're going to be running, you want to be Grand Chief at AMC. We, of course, wish you luck in that. If there was one person you could work with at AFN, leading AFN, who would it be?
Oh, I can't answer that.
Come on!
I don't know, but I'm not going to weigh in because
do you have a list?
Be a candidate. Of course I do in my head, and I have a wish list. But yeah, it is a tough decision to run. It's not an easy decision, and I was contemplating running again for AFN this year. Mm-hmm. But so many things have come to play in the last year, including this pandemic and the impact it has on my own personal family, and I have to be here for them while I'm doing the work that I need to do for our people. Because I've been asked. So yeah. I'm looking forward to whatever the results will be, though.
Well, we thank you guys for taking the time to join us. I could honestly talk to both of you for the rest of the afternoon between you and Bruce and getting some good callers in here. So thank you. Merci.